PowerPoint, and I guess I'm gonna have you introduce yourselves because I don't know anything good enough to introduce myself.
Okay, Mr. Michelle.
Hello.
How's lunch? Everything going good? Nobody's choked yet? I'd like to point out on the question sheet that got submitted, Miss Lori Moser did in fact request a Italian BMT, and it's over there. So we got your sandwich for you. Put you on the spot. I printed off these questions and I sent them to Ben and I was like, I literally left the sandwich preference on the list. I took out all the worthless columns, but I left that on there just to put you on the spot this morning. So we are not really prepared to do any kind of a formal class. This is just us kind of bullshitting to you guys. And then most of it's going to be, they're fine. And then most of it's going to be like a Q&A at the end. So we think that'll probably take a little bit more time than us blabbing about nothing. So Ben's going to talk a little bit about something else. I'm going to talk about how we measure properties. And this is going to be a loose description. And I'm going to refer you to a document that you guys have probably never heard of and you're probably not going to want to read because it's super dry and boring. Okay. When we measure a property, we have to do something for Fannie Mae loans. Anyway, we have to measure with ANSI building standards. That's ANSI building standards. What the hell is that? Doesn't really matter to you guys. But when you measure a house and we measure a house, if it's different, that's why. And I want to use an example on something that I listed and some appraiser who's not in this room did kill my deal. You guys have all probably listed a house, looks kind of like this, right? That upper floor, you can see that, right? Okay. Yeah. That upper floor is where it gets fun. So first, let's look at what the county says.
Let me share your screen for the people online to see what you're.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I didn't know people were online.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to me talk, guys.
I mean, there are people that said they were gonna be.
So they just like get the kids the camera like right in my face when they're online, like they're just looking at me. It's freaky. Good thing I wore a shirt. Amanda's gonna be our technology saver today because I don't know about Ben, but I can't do it. I can't do it.
I'm gonna try my best. That doesn't mean it's actually going to work. I might have just been sending this instead of that. If that's not sharing, I want you to share this.
Well, it's only like a 5-minute presentation.
There we go.
So it's fine.
Here we go.
Well, while Amanda's doing, is it working? Okay. So upstairs, right? You're looking at this house and you're thinking, hey, okay, it's probably got sloped roof, maybe low ceilings. What's going on with it? So you come to the county because, you know, you're listing, time is money. So you don't measure it yourself and you go, hey, the county's got it right. I'm gonna throw that in there. So this is what happened to me. I did measure it and I found the county to be wrong. But the county has 260 square feet on the upper level. Can you see that with the dam really? So here's what happened. I go up there and I measured it based on what I felt was functional because I'm wearing the two hats, right? Realtor, appraiser. Throw the appraiser hat in the trash. I'm a realtor. I'm like, I'm going to market this house, get the most money. So here's what happened to me. Nothing. That's what I'm saying. Hang on. There it is. All right. So there's the second level. It's functional. There were 3 vents up there. One was return, 2 were supply vents. So it's got a permanent heat source. We all know that matters, right? Got a permanent heat source. It's got sloped ceilings and it's got low ceilings. So I measured it and I said, forget the low ceilings. I can walk up there. Of course, I'm a little dude. Ben can probably still walk up there. Slope ceilings, we all know, don't count until it gets to a certain height. If we don't know that, ANSI regulates that, ANSI. They regulate what the ceiling height has to be. And they've always said anything over 5 feet counts. Anything under 5 feet doesn't count. So on this one, you can see that knee wall over here on the edge of the room is only about 2.5, 3 feet high. So we start up where that bevel hits 5 feet and then measure across. That's our square footage. This is where it gets a little funky. ANSI also requires at least 50% of a floor to be 7 foot or taller to count at all. This one was 6'11" and about 1/2 inch. It was damn close. You could probably remove the carpet and it would be 7. But it wasn't. So I said this floor not agreeing with the county's 200 and some square feet. I put 301, no, where is it? The ceiling height has to be at least 5 feet tall to count, but for the level, the entire floor to count at all, at least half of the floor has to be at least 7 feet. So this room has, 10-foot ceilings. If it has sloping, we know over half of it's 10 foot. Anything that slopes down has to be at least 5 foot. I know it gets a little weird. But with this house specifically, since all of the ceilings were no more than 7 foot tall, the appraiser didn't count it at all. So my deal got busted. It cost me 328 square feet, I think it was. So what that did is it killed our sale by about $12,000. That is not the appraiser's fault. That bank sells to Fannie Mae, so he has to follow ANSI. He or she has to follow ANSI. There's weird little rules that we have to follow, and please call, I'm gonna throw Ben out there too, and Jeb. I'll give you his cell number at the end of the day. There's weird little rules we have to follow to measure these properties. So when something comes in and you go, wow, this is not a 600 square foot house. Why did you not count the second floor at all? Well, they require us to count it as an amenity. So it's a finished attic now, or some kind of a $sign adjustment at the bottom. Then they yell at us for doing that. So some of the stuff we get, Ben and I have talked about this house. We both count this because it's damn close. But Fannie Mae and some appraisers who follow it very, very closely don't and shouldn't count it. But that's not good news for us out there. The reason why is this person bought this house 3 years ago, 4 years ago. It counted at that time. Their loan was sold to Freddie Mac, so ANSI didn't matter. Since it is now being sold to Fannie Mae, their entire second floor just got obliterated and it's gone. So that can really matter when you're talking to your sellers. And I don't know how to make light of that information when you're talking to a seller. I know my seller understood because I kind of gave her a heads up. This might be an issue. I think as long as you give them a heads up and just tell them, this is appraisers they're governed on this. It's not their fault. They have to measure from ceiling height. We're going to advertise it. We're going to try to make it to where this counts. But if ultimately it doesn't count, it's Fannie Mae that's doing that stuff. Does anybody have any questions on that before I give Ben market value? Ms. Gordon?
So when you're looking at cost,
Mm-hmm.
if you're using this as a cost,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't change the 324 whatever credit you gave it to the second floor, and you don't know it's better because you didn't actually do the.
Right.
You just assume that that's correct and use that into the square footage for a home.
So we have to have a source and then verify a source. So technically, we use the MLS and we can cross-reference the county. We should probably then call some kind of a party to the transaction, whether it be a listing agent, selling agent, buyer, seller, something like that. I'm not gonna lie to you and say that I do that every time. Maybe these guys do. I don't. I trust that the MLS data is pretty accurate. I do cross-reference it with the county. If one of them is off by a big number, then I might try to verify it with somebody that's involved in the transaction. But for the most part, for the sake of time, because if you verify everything, it takes a long time. For the sake of time, we tend to rely on MLS. I tend to rely on MLS and cross-reference with the county, and they're usually reasonably close because a lot of us, myself included, when we list a house, just take the number off the county. It's just a bad practice. Try to measure the houses. In fact, some states, I was in a class about this yesterday. Some states now, it's a state law that you cannot input something in the MLS if you've relied solely on county square footage. County does not have to follow ANSI standards. Realtors do not have to follow ANSI standards. Appraisers don't always have to, but when it's being sold to Fannie Mae, we have to, with a few exceptions, which we can talk about later. So with that said, just try to get in the habit of measuring. And when you measure from the outside wall. That's what we're supposed to do. Measure from the outside and then work your way in. So it's hard on the second floor because you're shooting your laser, you're dragging the tape measure. If you're still doing that, by the way, get a laser to like 30 bucks. You're measuring the walls and it says, hey, this room is 19 feet. Generally speaking, it's probably 20 feet because you have two 6-inch walls. Add that to it. Okay. You're supposed to.
So can we just measure from corner to corner on the exterior?
You can on the first floor.
Right.
But if you're on the second or third floor, like this house, you know the width is the same because you can, oh, this is so bad. You know the width is the same because it's got the same sidewalls as the first floor, right? But then where the hell is this dormer at? I mean, where does the ceiling start right here inside? So that's where you're measuring from the inside. It's all you can do. But you have to add that dimension of the wall to properly get your square footage, your gross living area.
Measure does the finished square footage for a bedroom.
Mhm.
So for me, it's difficult because a lot of buyers, when they see that, they say, oh, this is a 10 by 12 bedroom. But really 3 feet of that is a closet. I can't fit my bed in
Right.
7 foot.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's a good point. So when I'm listing a house, it's different than when I'm appraising a house, right?
Gotcha.
That closet's not part of the bedroom size. It is a closet. It's still finished square footage. It's part of the gross living area of the structure. But the bedroom, that's more of a county requirement, especially for septic. It's got to be at least 100 square feet, I think, with a closet to be a bedroom, right? So in that instance, that's not a bedroom because the closet is not part of the bedroom square footage. It's separate. Does that make sense?
I've seen some massive primary closets that look like a bed.
Yeah.
I'm like.
Yeah. No, and they can be, yeah, huge. I mean, they absolutely can be. I mean, and it's part of gross living area. In fact,
They're in the closet.
not to bore you with this, but those building standards that we follow specifically exclude areas under stairways, and the ceiling height is different for bathrooms and laundry rooms. Ben and Jeff are like, well, I didn't read that part. I'm the nerd that read the whole thing. So if you have a question, call any of us. We can help you. We have the document. If you wanted a PDF email to you, I was gonna print them off, but it's like 80 pages long and you're not gonna read it. It's super boring. Is it? It's a very dry document, but some MLSs are requiring people to use them now. The problem is if you're not going to Fannie Mae, that could ultimately hurt your seller's value because you're not giving it as much credit as you could.
And I'll add to this. So my opinion on that situation and this specific one is that the appraiser was probably incorrect because there's a blurb in there that says, or it can adhere to the market. And I think the market here in Topeka would accept that as square footage.
Mhm.
And so what that appraiser should have done was go in and make a comment saying this is not adhere to ANSI standards, blah, 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 but it does adhere to the market. So if you have a situation like this, you can definitely push back on the appraiser. And I will encourage you to do that. Unless
There's exemptions. There are exemptions on that. I mean, like this one, that specific exemption is like XXX1001 or something.
it's the same thing for berm homes too, because berm homes are technically basements, but we don't view them as basements. They're all
Right.
grade.
ANSI requires us to report a berm as being 100% below grade. You can't do that if it's going to Fannie Mae because the URA, the form that we use, we submit it and it gets flagged all over because you can't have 100% of your square footage below grade. But in a berm, it really is. So we exempt it from that requirement and we put it as above grade square footage. People always give us that question. Why is it a bedroom in a berm and not in a basement? I didn't create that rule. I just got to follow it.
Makes sense.
Hey, you want to talk about market value?
Yeah, real fun stuff. So this one kind of leads into the first question we're gonna answer. We've got a list of a few questions.
Okay,
But I was just gonna give a quick rundown on what the definition of market value is, which is what we determine. I know you guys do your sale price and we come up with our opinion of market value. So I was just gonna run through the definition real quick, about 2 minutes, if I read it fast. Huh?
You said 2 slides.
No, I did 4 slides. 3
Said
slides.
2.
Anyways, so my name is Ben Mosier. I've probably talked to a lot of you people on the phone, but I hardly get to meet any agents in person. So it's nice to finally see some faces.
Oh,
So
sorry, I'm Anthony Bunting.
everybody knows Anthony. I don't need to introduce Anthony.
Yeah.
You don't get it.
Yeah, you're good. Is it like-
Please do.
I'll just stand.
You don't get embarrassed.
I don't, but I do turn red. I just have no control over it. It happens when I drink beer too, so.
So what is market, what is market value? Well, it's the most probable price that a property should bring in a competitive and open market under all conditions requisite for a fair sale. The buyer and seller are each acting prudently, knowledgeable, and assuming the price is not affected by undue stimulus and is implicit in the definition, or implicit in this definition is the consummation of a sale as of a specified date and the passing of title under conditions whereby the buyer and seller are typically motivated. I guess I'll screen back. Fannie Mae goes further to clarify that adjustments can be made to comparables or special financing. So the first question we got was, do appraisers know if there's seller participation in the buyer's closing cost? And if so, do they take that into consideration when valuing a property? So Fannie Mae wants us to make adjustments if there's seller paid closing cost or if there's rate. We don't really see many rate buy downs here, but when you get to more expensive homes, new constructions that are $1 million to $5 million, sometimes they have them, or other below market rate financing or discount points. Comparable sales that include sales or financing concessions must be adjusted to reflect the impact, if any, on a sale price of the comparables based on the market at the time of the sale. So here's the question. And the answer to that is I always adjust now for closing costs because 9.9 out of 10 times that the closing costs do affect the sale price, I think. And all appraisers are different on this, but I think that in our market that, you know, if you tack on $7,000 to $8,000 of closing costs, it's definitely going to affect that sale price by probably that much. And if you guys all think differently, then I would be glad to hear it. But based on what I've talked to with some people, and I think that the closing cost has a direct impact on the sale price.
And I viewed that as different for a long time.
And so I did too until a couple of years ago.
Recently, and Fannie Mae really wants us to put that adjustment in there. I always argued that, what if they are typical? What if 85% of homes, let's just put us in West Indian Hills, okay, 25th and Indian Hills, east side of the road there, right? They're all pretty similar homes, Indel built them. So what if 85% of the homes in there, I'm making this up, have, you know, $3,000 in seller paid assistance at closing? Well, those are typical. And my guess is when you talk to the seller to list the house, you're going to tell them, hey, be aware it's probably going to happen. And we might just have to do it. It's pretty normal. At that point, I wouldn't adjust for 3,000 or below because it's typical in the market. But if it was 5,000, I'd adjust it 2,000 to bring it back to what is typical. And I've been around and around with a lot of appraisers who agree with me, who don't agree with me on this. And now I've kind of hit the consensus that I think most appraisers are doing exactly that. I think they're adjusting them because,
Especially since the time of the COVID times when
Yeah.
housing went crazy, nobody was doing closing costs,
And they
nobody
had
was doing
to-
inspections, nobody was doing anything besides paying over contract price or list price.
same. So they haven't been typical. So I've been adjusting them across the grid. I can stand back up. You know, that's good.
So that's kind of what I got for the market value, which is the number that we decide.
So those are our big lecture points, guys.
Yeah.
Who has questions?
You do. So I have a current situation where I'm actually arguing with the appraiser on the comparables that they were using. She's gone a whole year back, and we have plenty that are within 6 months. And the ones she's using a year ago they're not as good in favor of the sale price as the ones that I'm using from the 6 months.
Sure.
Also something else, I walked through personally 3 of the 5 comparables that I brought to her, so I know these comparables really well. The square footage on the main are very similar within 50 square feet of my subject property. And she's still telling me that I need to adjust for, condition or for per square foot for the basement versus the main. So I guess what my question is timeframe. What, if we have comparables in 6 months, why would we use a comparable from a year ago on the appraiser side? And I always thought we wanted to use a more recent sale when.
So the 1 year sale, you can't go back farther than here, is more of like what is a GSE loan requirement, a government sponsored.
Like a Fannie Mae.
Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, VA, USDA.
That you can't go further than.
They don't
That's-
want you to.
That's their requirement, not ours.
Not ours. We can go back as far as to find the perfect comp, but you got to adjust for those market conditions. But like you said, there's plenty of sales recent.
And to your point, the argument that I would have with whoever that was, hopefully it wasn't me, I don't think we've been arguing. So probably mentioned something along the lines of, you know, market is changing constantly. It always is. Especially right now, it's a dynamic market. And we had some seriously increasing prices for a long, long time. The market's doing something weird right now that I'm seeing, but there's not enough data to really put a label on what it's doing.
Right.
And just, I think I would just sound the fact that it's probably more accurate to be as recent as possible on the sales rather than go back into when COVID was still affecting things.
And it, like, if they're a year ago, it was definitely a different market than it is
It is.
today. Even back in December, it was different than it is today.
Does that help, Cheryl?
It does. I felt confident that I have a good.
But I think you should definitely submit whatever you can to the lender and be like, hey, they need to submit a revision request to the appraiser, and they should definitely look into it.
And that's the big thing is you have to go through the lender. Our client is who we have to take direction from.
Right.
So we get calls from you guys all the time. That's welcome for me. I can't speak for these guys. Perfectly welcome for me. But there's a lot of things I can't talk to you about. There's a lot of changes I can't start making unless I get that same request from the client. You can give me a heads up, you're gonna submit that change request, but there's really nothing I can do until I get word or an email from that company.
So if somebody ever wants to contest it, they need to go to the lender. Obviously, they can come to you and give you a heads up,
Yeah.
but truly, it needs to go to the lender.
And I mean, I'd even accept comps. I don't know about
Yeah.
you, but if you want to send them to me, I'd look at them, but I can't do anything until I hear from the lender.
Yeah.
Do you think it makes a difference at all when the real estate agent comparables before you go to the property?
Sometimes.
Especially if there were multiple offers, if they let you know that, hey, we had 3 offers on this, they were all at this price, does that make a difference when you're
Yeah.
valuing?
Yes, it does, especially the multiple offers thing. That's something, if you had multiple offers and you went with one for some reason, even if it wasn't the highest one,
Right.
document that. Just say, you don't have to give me the agents and stuff like that. Just say, hey, we got 3 or 4 offers. This is what they were for. We ultimately chose this one because it was the highest price. It had no inspections, whatever.
Sure.
Yeah, that absolutely makes a difference because when we get some kind of internal audit done by the underwriters and they challenge us and they say, we feel you overvalued the property, something like that happens, we can, in our report, we can document in there, hey, this actually is a dealing one. The market value is defined as such. We followed that definition. And these are the 4 offers and they chose this one and it's right in there. So.
Is it better to give it to you, the day of the appraisal or give it to you far in advance?
Probably when we go to set it up, maybe if you've got something, once you see that text come through that we scheduled it, send it over.
I'd say the earlier the better, because sometimes we pull comps before we go, maybe it's an hour drive away. So we'll pull comps that are a $60,000 house, we pull comps for 40, comps for 90, whatever, nice houses, crap, we don't know where we're going to. And then when we get there, we're like, hey, we need the nicer ones, this is a nice house, so we take those pictures while we're there. So if you already have them, especially in a rural area or somewhere that we don't, they're not on the MLS or something.
Or if you know of one that's, not on MLS, that was anything not on MLS is big.
Kind of a caveat on all that. If it's a commercial deal, if anybody's selling commercial stuff, if you know of something that's under contract or even for sale, since there is no commercial MLS, send those the second you know about it, because in the commercial side, we can actually use an active listing or an under contract listing. It doesn't have to be a sold sale, it doesn't have to be confirmed. So a little different market there.
So is there anything else that helps list improvements, I would assume, but is there anything that falls outside of multiple offers, those improvements and columns that we can provide you to support the value we have?
I think those are big things. for
Those are
me.
probably the big ones.
I know this has nothing to do with your question, but how you can help us, I guess. There was a question in there, do you want the seller to be home? Does it help? Not for me, because usually they want to point out every good thing or bad thing, depending on the situation. A lot of times it's a distraction. If they have a list of improvements they want to leave for us, that's fine. They can be home. I'm not gonna run them off, but usually we can do our job a little better if they're not there.
I share my same opinion.
Yeah, unless there's an angry dog. I saw your dog on your paper.
Yeah,
There's
I
a,
love dogs, but I don't like mean dogs.
Yeah.
I would rather see somebody with a gun than a mean dog. And we've seen them both.
yeah. I know we're throwing a lot of random stuff at you, but like, I think the questions, I know you guys have had issues. Some of you called me, some of you called Ben, some of you called both of us. I've called Ben. So if you have anything like that, just throw them at us, throw us at them or whatever.
Well, I have a question for you.
God damn it.
Are you seeing more homes not appraising out at the contract price?
Lately I haven't seen that as much, because I feel like the frenzy in some markets have been subduing a little bit, for lack of better words. You're seeing it. There are price reductions happening now. We're seeing sellers offering different kinds of incentives. Some stuff still going nuts, especially in that mid 100 to 200 range. You got investors buying, you got first time home buyers buying. I can't speak to every market, but I have seen some markets slowing a little. It's what it seems to be doing. We can't really be sure of that until it happens and it's behind us, and that's when we start to adjust for it. I think it's kind of starting to happen right now. So I will say, alongside of that question is, when you guys are writing contracts, I can't slander or push for any lenders, okay? I won't do that, but I've got a couple deals right now on the appraisal side where the lenders are a local person, but they farm it out to a company out of state. Without giving too much away here, I appraised it for what it sold for, because I was justified in that. They did an internal review. They felt that I overvalued it. They shredded my appraisal and they internally valued it and killed the deal by $15,000. So that is happening right now. Some of those underwriters are starting to get a little bit apprehensive and super cautious moving forward. So you might have that to contend with. I actually didn't even know that had happened until the agent kind of confronted me about it and said, "Hey, you killed my deal." I said, "No, I was good." We found out what actually happened. So there are lenders doing that. And that's out of our hands. So that one is a good example of know who you're sending loan work to. I mean, even if there's a loaning officer that you get beers with or something, that they're farming it out to an out-of-state bank, that can be a challenge. Yeah.
So what's the point of sending it out for appraisal if they're just gonna?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd never seen that happen before, and it happened to me. This is the same bank. It happened to me on one, and it's kind of happening to me on the second one right now. So it's the same bank. So just be aware that that is occurring. And why? Because the buyer or somebody is still paying me to do that appraisal. So that's a good question, man. I don't know.
And sometimes these lenders have what's called a collateral underwriting system where they will just put their appraisal through it and it'll spit out a score. And it could be way off. I get questions all the time like, "Hey, this came back at a high risk, whatever." I was like, "Well, I've got 3 good comps.
Yeah.
I don't know what your system's doing, but this is what it is in Topeka, not Chicago, not LA, not New York."
That's right.
So a lot of those places are seeing declined properties and they think that is the whole nation, but Topeka is not declining. It's far declining.
But when the agent is, for lack of better terms, vetting the lenders for this, what questions would we ask them to figure out if they are farming these out? So that you know,
Just ask them if they use a management company for their appraisals.
but doesn't everybody use a third party?
No, that went away years ago. Some lenders in town think you still have to, and that's not true, that you do not have to use an AMC anymore. Third parties are not required.
Rotation of appraisers that.
Yeah.
Okay,
They have rotations, but they don't all have to use like a management company that it's like the middleman, right? So then we're not allowed to talk to the lender at all. We have to go through this middleman and they go back to the lender, then they come back and it makes it difficult for us.
That's about the only question I think as an agent you can really be prepared to ask is, do you use an appraisal management company? Not that we don't vote to work for them. I mean, we get it, but that traditionally is a sign that they're going to be a little bit more conservative and a little bit of a pain in the ass.
I have a question that would be helpful, I think, with everybody in the room for Kennyans. So obviously last year we saw home prices that were crazy. I had a home that buyer's purchase ended up purchasing for $40,000 over asking, but it appraised at that. When we go to resell these, is it helpful to put in agent notes, property appraised at that versus people thinking, oh, these people I bet had to bring cash to the table because they could see the original list price as X.
Yeah.
Number one, is that appropriate as an agent to do an agent notes, because I don't know that answer, I'm just throwing the question out. But 2, is that helpful also to provide the previous appraisal from a year ago to the new appraisal?
That's risky.
Sometimes when I see it sold 40, 50 over, I'll call the agent and just be like, "Hey, did this appraise out or not?" And then that usually solves that problem.
Okay.
That's what I do.
Yeah, if you put those in there,
But I don't know what the rooms are. If you can you put that in?
I think you can. I don't think there's really, yeah, the agent remarks are reasonably flexible. It's the public remarks that get kind of dicey, so.
As far as the agent remarks, since we have all these amazing professionals, would you want to see that in the agent notes?
Yes.
Any information like that, don't help.
Yeah.
So
I support putting this appraised, in the remarks. I think that's far different than posting the appraisal document on the MLS.
Yeah, that's not a great deal.
Perfectly appropriate.
Yeah.
I just don't want the shock value of saying, oh my gosh, we saw what this before, and then the presumption that they had to bring cash to the
Sure.
table when it actually appraised.
That's, I see your concern there, because if the market were to decline, nobody wants to say that out loud, but if the market were to decline and you can see that data trending that way, at that point, it really doesn't matter what it appraised for then, because I mean, it's a whole different deal, but it's still helpful, at least in today's market, it's helpful.
Especially if it's within a year of my presumption.
Or even if they did pay 10,000 cash over the appraised value, that would help too. Because maybe we wouldn't use that sale.
And that's still, I mean, you know, if it had 4 offers and they were all over what it appraised for and everybody got cash. Yeah, so at that point, then we asked ourselves the question, what was the market value of that home? I mean, everybody offered cash, only one person offered cash, so we gotta look at that stuff.
So I guess, what is your definition of a declining market? Because year to date, we're, I think, what, 12% less close transactions this year? So at what point do you define it as a?
Yeah, so the number of sales in the market, in my opinion, Jeff Ben, sorry to put you on the spot, I'm in the back of the room hiding out back there, but in my opinion, the number of sales doesn't really matter. It's what the market value is and what the values are doing. You know, if no one wants to move, that doesn't mean the market's declining. That just means realtors aren't making any money. I don't want that to happen either, okay, because I'm a realtor, but that's the more of the value trends is what we track for a declining market.
And I have not seen one, I guess I've seen one, that it was a divorce case, that's an outlier. But I haven't seen a resale that sold below what it sold for 2 years ago or a year ago. And that's usually the first indicator where someone's trying to sell their house because they got to get out of it. It sells for 5,000 lower.
Yeah. And we track that.
Yeah.
I know Ben and I do. I think Jeff does.
I track it for
Ben
him.
tracks it for Jeff. We look at those metrics a lot, and put them into Excel spreadsheets and try to see what different neighborhoods are doing. And we try to keep track of that.
I've got one computer, but it takes a long pull up.
Yeah, don't pull it up. Nobody wants to see that.
It's pretty cool.
Got a question.
What's up, Matt?
My name's Michael. I'm
Yeah.
very green to the real estate side.
Welcome to the game.
16 years, thank you very much. I appreciate that. 16 years of audio, video, technology in town, electronic live here, so I'm your tech realtor, if you will. What's the value you put on? Because I get this all the time. People are selling a house here or there, like, hey, what do you think, Michael? What should I do? And I'm like, well, if we got some equipment that can walk out of a rack, anything, but if you built in throughout, that's speakers, and a lot of times TVs, they don't want to mess with the mount, bring that down. How much value are you all putting into technology as we are seeing the advent of more and more technology in our home?
Really put us on the spot there. I see Ben looking at me.
Yep.
So,
We have to be able to prove that technology adds
And it does,
value. And I mean, it could add appeal, but we have to be able to say, you know, this house A with all this technology sold for 200, but the exact same house next door without that sold for, if it sold for 200, it doesn't add any value.
I would say that's a little bit of a bargaining or a little bit of negotiating.
yeah,
It's there, obviously, depending on what type of system you have in it.
yeah, it is no different. That is exactly the same as a patio.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Nicer day.
The question ultimately is, how does the market respond to it? And
Right.
that's stuff that we do our best to try to find an answer to. I know you want an exact answer on what we give technology.
No, that's
Here to
fine.
give that answer.
There's different levels there.
Yeah, there are. I will
There's a
say,
dedicated home theater, that's quite a value versus just a little surround sound.
Yeah. someone asked me that question 4 years ago. And I sold one of my friends a house near Berkshire Golf Course, and he paid about $8,000 more than any of the surrounding houses, and it was a smart house.
Right.
iPads in the walls, it was really pretty. The question is, was that because it had technology in the house, or was it because the garage ceilings were 12 feet and not 9 feet, and it had an extra half bath? So there's a lot of little variables we looked at. It does seem to do something to some people. But there's always gonna be one or two buyers who don't give a crap, and that's the problem.
What you need to know also, as a parent, because I can come in and do a complete automation system that's putting value, green initiatives, much power, sort of HVAC control, lighting control. I can put in there,
It's expensive.
water leak sensors all over, so if there's a water leak in the basement, we got a lot of clientele,
Yeah.
high end in this town, they go out of town for 2 weeks at a time.
Right.
I've had nights that flooded out the entire basement and house, because they were gone.
Yeah.
The washing machine flooded out, so we can put a leak sensor on there and a $500 auto shut off of your main line of water coming to your house.
Yeah.
Those are little things that are definitely gonna add up, and you are seeing more people.
Yeah.
We are, for sure.
And we can adjust qualitatively, not put a number on it, just say, this does help.
Yeah.
And then we can say, we'll gear our value towards the upper end of the value range.
I'm just an advocate.
Or shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
It is, it helps, I mean, not just as a sales consultant side of it.
Sure.
I mean, it's just as good as your gutter system, it's just as
Right.
good as how you wrap your foundation being secure, it's just, I mean, really, it is coming to that point.
I think that's one of those things that we need more sales
Yeah,
with it, and it need to be prominently labeled that it has it.
exactly.
it's kind of the same as like a geothermal system, right?
Very simple.
Oh, yeah.
You can't,
I've been waiting for that question.
there's the only houses with geothermals haven't really sold. Because you put a 20, I don't know how much it costs, like 25, $35,000.
Oh,
You
yeah.
put it in, you're not gonna move.
Right.
You're building it out, on land where you're gonna stay for the rest of your life. How do we put
Those
it?
bills are like, yeah, solar panels.
Yes.
Solar panels is a big one too.
So that's, I listened.
That was my solar panels.
Great.
Same with pool though, you have to have the desirability from the buyers to.
I'm tracking solar panels right now. So solar panels obviously normally get put on a rural property where people kind of want more flexibility. We call it off the grid, even though it's not, but that's one thing. And most of those homes aren't reselling. Obviously, they're putting that in there so they can live there for 20 or 30 years with lower bills. What about the people that spend $42,000 to put solar panels on their roof at 29th and Longacre?
And they're paying for it. It's a payment plan.
That's the problem. That's the problem. So I'm ignoring tax rebates. We're gonna ignore that completely in this conversation. You want me to bore you about taxes? We can talk about that later, but what I'm seeing is, and I saw it on one specific sale so far, is that the house sold, they just spent $42,000 on solar panels. And they had $36,000 left to pay. And what ultimately ended up happening was a reduction in sales price by that $36,000 because the buyer found out and said, well, fuck that. They didn't want to pay it. So that actually hurt the value of the home. That's a very loose conversation. Okay, don't take that seriously yet. I'm really watching that because that's a big thing in our markets. We have some salesmen door to door selling that stuff and they're very good at it. They're selling a lot of it. So.
And there's also instances where, you can buy them or you can lease them, right? But there's also instances where they can move them. Where I did an appraisal out in a different county and they put solar panels in and they're like, hey, we got these solar panels. Can you add this to the appraisal? And I didn't say anything because I'm not gonna say anything. I didn't give it any value. They sold the house a year later. I went back to do the appraisal. Solar panels were gone. So they were personal property at that point. So we kind of have to decide if they're personal property or not. They can take them with them.
Yeah.
Because if I would have valued their house as that was real estate, then that would have been bad.
Yeah. There was a guy that's, his name's Phil, so you know him, Phil Systemore, he had started with, Drebay doing they had a side business doing, roofing. American commercial roofing, and then he's kind of started his own solar roofing. I think to me, because, being in the AV business for so many years, the big thing with satellite, putting a satellite antenna on your roof is kind of that chance of it eventually, maybe leaking or the install right, you know what I mean? So I think that I can see in the future them doing a better way of installing on roofs, because eventually you want to be able to maintain that roof line if you gotta, you gotta take that off, put it back on, so. Sure. I think there's a possibility that I'll have some Phil's looking at that, so, anyway. And then having a battery on the side versus, send it back, that power.
Yep. There's a lot of questions with that we just aren't there yet. Yeah. We're just not ready. Yeah. On the appraiser side. Cheryl, again.
I'm gonna completely change the subject. So when square footage, when you come to actually value a price. So a lot of times appraisers say, oh, we don't go off of the total square footage. We get that. you adjust the main floor and below grade completely differently. But when you're coming up with a price, how exactly do you do that if you're not looking at price per square foot overall as far as what the value of the house is? So where does the number come from?
So- Our report is very difficult to read. I'm just gonna start with that. We have a section in our sales comparison approach, which itemizes everything: date of sale, site, location, view, age, quality, condition, above grade, below grade. And so we compare everything to each other. We don't compare the whole property to the whole property. And so how we come up with our adjustments are different ways, but it's called a paired sales analysis, where you can take home A, home B, sold one's 1,500 square feet, one's 1,000, find out what the difference in square foot and what the difference in price is. This is for no basement, so it makes it easy for above. And then you calculate the above grade adjustment.
Right.
Or you can do regression models, or there's other ways to do it.
Yeah.
So
And
you would take.
But we pretty much itemize everything of the house and compare those items to each item of the other house, if that makes sense.
And make the appropriate adjustments for every single thing.
Yeah,
So as a real estate agent, how do we do that? Knowing what you do so that we can price it accordingly, especially when sometimes you can do that. I mean, you come up with a price, let's say we do it perfectly based on your guidelines. And then it appraises for 20%.
right.
I've seen that
Yes.
in the last year even.
So, you have 1,600 square foot range, then find other 15 to 1,800 square foot range.
So that's what I did.
With similar basements if you can.
I guess.
Then you don't use the total, basement and first.
Right, you just make adjustments for condition, bedrooms, square
We
foot.
try to make the least amount of adjustments as possible.
But
That's what
do
we're
you
doing.
compare a ranch to a split level to a bi-level? I've had
Depends on the
appraisers
neighborhood.
tell me,
Like during COVID, you probably could have, because people just wanted houses. It's just houses. It doesn't matter if it's in the same area, we're good to go. But in a normal stabilized market, that's not normally how that works. People that want a ranch, if they want just any house, they might buy a bi-level or a split level. They're kind of comparable, or a story and a half or a split level. But style is really an important thing in most markets. It just maybe wasn't so important during those COVID craze times, but it's an important thing to try to stay as close as you can. Now, with that said, you can't ignore a house that's right next door, but we might use that as a fourth comp to find 3 good similar style houses within a few blocks. And then we'll use the one that's not the same style that's right next door, because it is right next door. Just kind of add some support to our conclusion, but ultimately I would try to stay as similar in style as you can.
so that's pretty easy to do, especially with how many sales we've had in the last 6 months to a year. But my question is how do I come up with that after the adjustments? I mean, each adjustment has its own specific amount that you adjust for. So if it's a 3-bedroom versus a 4-bedroom, or the condition's a little nicer in this one than this one, how do us as real estate agents figure out exactly how much to adjust for that specific? Especially because it seems every appraiser adjusts differently. I've had appraisers tell me 1-bedroom is $1,500 more, whereas other appraisers have told me, oh no, that's a $5,000 to $7,000 adjustment.
Well, and it also depends on the market too, because you have, again, we'll keep throwing 29th and Wanamaker out there, but let's compare it to Oakland. You're not going to find very many homes at 29th and Wanamaker that are a 1-bedroom, and very few 2-bedrooms even. But you're going to have a handful of 1-bedrooms, a lot of 2-bedrooms, and then the random 4-bedroom home in Oakland. So the adjustment we would apply here versus there is completely different, because we have to look at those neighborhoods specifically and say, okay, Oakland,
Sure.
4th and whatever twist. This house is a 4-bedroom house. The only other 4-bedroom house is similar to this, brought 80,000, and the surrounding 2-bedroom houses only brought 65,000. Well, is that the adjustment then for the 2 extra bedrooms, or is that because the square footage was bigger too? So it's complex,
That's the
and
question is, how do we?
lots of research.
Have to make those adjustments
Honestly,
accordingly?
the only way you can be accurate with what you're doing is just do lots of research. And I know nobody wants to hear that, because as extroverts, as realtors, your job is to be marketing and shaking hands and kissing babies and putting signs in yards. And I get that. You don't want to sit in front of a computer and what I call nerd out in front of an Excel spreadsheet and track stuff. But ultimately, that is what you have. That's the only way to be accurate with what you're doing, unless you want to call one of us or three of us. And
Is there any type of like guideline that you guys have that you can maybe share with us, like a template that real estate agents can use to these adjustments?
Not really.
no, because it's market specific.
Why would we not?
It's,
Why would we not? Because
I get it.
in all seriousness, I mean, literally, how do I know what the adjustment is for a, and I understand on each subdivision is different. I'm not gonna compare, you know, Indian Hills subdivision versus Oakland, right? We understand that, but the difference, for my opinion, in your opinion, in his opinion, and Stacy's opinion, and Sarah Schultz, I mean, they're all completely different.
Yeah.
So who makes this? Who decides?
yeah,
what
well,
standard is?
so here's what you have. So more so now probably than ever, you have some appraisers who are trying to track it and trying to figure out what those new adjustments are. And you have, I'm throwing Jeff under the bus. I'm not doing this intentionally, but you have some aging appraisers who, they've done it the same way for a long time and they don't plan to track all this anymore. They're done with that. They're gonna give a pool 5,000 because that's what it was worth in 1996, period, we're done. Well, it's not worth that anymore. They're contributing more because people want them. The market is cyclical. That will change again. It always will. And Ben obviously keeps Jeff in check. So Jeff's a good one. But I mean, that is ultimately what happens is if you get someone in their job who is lazy, their adjustment isn't going to be the same as someone who's trying to be proactive and staying ahead of it. Is it a perfect science? No. But we should do the best that we can to try to keep up with what stuff's bringing in the market. And that's why a cheat sheet for one neighborhood, you need 100 of them, okay?
Right.
You need a cheat sheet for every neighborhood and that cheat sheet would have to be changing constantly. You need to be calling us all the time. What?
I was under the impression that you were going away for adjustments for bedrooms and more looking at square footage. Is that wrong? I thought that's kind of where we were headed.
Yeah, so that's an opinion thing for sure. And it's definitely a market-based adjustment because there are some markets, for example, you have a house blocked from here and you've got a 3-bedroom house and then it's right next door to a 2-bedroom house. They're the exact same house, perfect clone, same square footage and everything. But this guy took out a wall and he's got a big 2nd bedroom. Maybe there is no adjustment for that because of the exact same size. But maybe there is a 5% adjustment for that. And we just have to track it. And everyone is different. A lot of times from what I've seen, the square footage alone tends to cover that. Big time, not when you're talking about a 1-bedroom versus a 2. Sometimes not so much on a 2 versus a 3. That's why if you're trying to comp a house that is a 2-bedroom, just try to use 2 bedrooms.
Yes.
I mean, really just try to stay as close as you can. I know that's not always realistic. Do the best you can because it's not a perfect science and it's not easy.
I think we should find good comparers.
Right now, it's not.
That number.
Yeah.
Is the beauty and magic of it all, and.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out how you guys come up with that with some type of.
So there
Here.
are things that would get us in a lot of trouble probably if I said right now. So on my birthday, Merry Christmas. So
You're being recorded.
square footage adjustments are challenging, okay? And because when agents call us, these houses are bringing $147 a square foot. My house is 200 square feet bigger. So I just apply that 147 to 200 square feet? No, because that's not the contributory value of that excess square footage. Because you might have the exact same room count, but this one has a bigger rec room, or this one has a bigger master bedroom, primary bedroom. Like that's the stuff that really matters. And generally speaking, I could probably get with you and get you an idea of how to do a square footage adjustment. Yeah, but the biggest thing is just don't apply that number, that dollar per square foot. You can't just apply that because it's a contributory number. Just like if you have a house with an outbuilding and that outbuilding was $110,000 to build, it may not bring $110,000 in extra value to the property. It might only contribute 40. So you look at different markets and the contributory value of different types of amenities and square footages, and you can usually pin down what that number is, but you're tracking some numbers. It's pretty nerdy.
And I'd say for your situation, I wouldn't focus on what we're doing, what we're adjusting for. I would,
Do your thing.
because you're trying to sell a house for as much as you possible, right? But I would get 6 comps and list them from smallest to biggest, if size is what you're worried about, and then find where yours fits in there.
Rank it.
And then kind of do a ranking system. Because I wouldn't worry about making it if it's $35 a square foot of contributing value or not, or 15 in the basement or 20 in the basement.
Yeah, that's right.
It's no fun doing this stuff.
You don't,
So there is no
there is.
There's
is.
science, but there's a lot of opinions too.
But there's a lot of opinion to it too, right?
right.
Every appraiser is different. My dad and I could go look at a house and do a blind appraisal and we could value it differently.
Right.
There's just
Or
no,
same with inspections, it's the same with a lot in our industry, so it's not, you know, it's a common trend in all different
it's
aspects.
not a perfect science, it's what everybody
Right,
says.
right.
Yeah.
Even the last 2 years, the county's like our house, you know,
It's gone up?
another 25 every year.
Yeah.
Okay, more value, 25,000. So how you guys adjust to that? It's gonna be tough to say.
I don't pay attention to anything the county does.
I don't either.
At all.
No,
No.
not unless somebody calls me and wants to protest their taxes and I look at the county value and I say, you don't want to protest your taxes because they're still probably fine.
To me, it just seems like the.
Okay.
And if we did call in the state, we have, fortunately, but if you get called in the state, somebody explains, but we have to have proof of how we came up with the adjustment for size. We don't take $45 a year. We have to have proof in the file.
Yeah, that's right. Melanie?
So when you get, I forget what you called it, but like the change request or
Revision.
something, a revision request. How do you receive that? Is that like welcome? Like I've heard people, appraisers say, like, that's really bad for us. We actually make the change.
Ben and I are perfect. We never get those. Next question.
I don't mind, I'll look into it. I look into it. I'll take whatever data you want to send our way and I'm open-minded to looking at it and checking it
Yeah.
out, making sure I didn't miss something, because I have missed them.
Oh, yeah,
I've missed something, not a lot, but I have, and it's affected the value.
especially in a busy.
Especially if busy market or if a house next door is sold on the county that I didn't do my due diligence and find that wasn't on MLS. It's happened before.
Yep.
And
No, it's
I know that there are some that take it personally, but
yeah, no, it's not like, I'm not gonna say nobody does, because somebody probably does somewhere, Fannie Mae, but like when I do an appraisal for vision, okay, which we all still call vision, because that's who you're always gonna be. So when you do an appraisal for vision, it's, you know, a little bit easier than US Bank, right? So I get a revision request from Renee and Renee goes, hey, agent thinks you're a dipshit. You missed this comp completely. Can you look at this? And I go, I did look at that, but the sister bought it and I don't know. Or maybe I look at it and I go, how the hell did I miss that? So I plug it in there and I'm like, wow, this thing is worth $12,000 more than I thought it was because I missed that comp. And I take it with a grain of salt because nobody's perfect. I'm far from it. And if you guys have a problem with something that we did, if there's something we can do to help, as long as it's justified on something we maybe missed or something happened, then by all means, send it.
it's coming from you guys. I don't take it personally, but I know the lender Anthony's talking about with his other situation where they've sent me 30 comps. It's like, we need you to review this. I'm like, they're not paying me to do it. So
Yeah.
I just go through and make a checklist, but they want me to comment on each and every one of them. That's what makes us upset and
Yeah,
annoys.
because now you
But when
have,
it's coming from you guys, it doesn't bother me. But when the lender runs it through their automated system and it thinks it's right, but it's wrong.
yeah,
Can you talk a little about acreage and what you're just valuing you know, whether it's full of trees and bushes, whether it's all.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, I hate to keep saying this, but it is market-based, so southeast is different from north, is different than Wabunsee County. It also depends on, you know, how big is the acreage? Is the typical buyer gonna be, sports use like a hunter? Is the typical buyer gonna be a home builder? So that factors in. For the longest time, it was, what I saw was that wooded 3-acre sites brought more than a cleared 3-acre site. Lately, everybody that's buying a 3-acre site is clearing them. So, which one's worth more? It's really a market-based thing, but land is a little tricky in that it depends on what its highest and best use is first, which is what we have to follow. What's the use of this land that's gonna bring it the most value as raw land? And that's completely different on a 40-acre parcel on a corner with all utilities available, because you're gonna split that up and do something as long as the county will let you. Versus a 28-acre parcel that's a flag shape, which can't be split unless you're selling to the neighbor, in which case it's probably worth maybe even a little bit less because it's just gonna be surplus land that can't be split off. So land's tricky, throwing a lot of terms at you that I probably shouldn't be, but when you're looking at land, and let's just say most land is bringing $5,000 to $7,000 an acre, and you're thinking, hey, okay, I'm gonna call it $6,000 an acre. The biggest thing for me when I'm doing land, I do a lot of land appraisals, is make sure that you're comparing it to land that has similar frontage. Because that is such an important thing for a lot of buyers when they're buying properties. Now, someone who's gonna build a massive log cabin for $3 million probably doesn't care. But your typical end user on land is gonna care if they can sell off that 3-acre piece, or if they have a buffer between them and their neighbors. I mean, the frontage is a pretty big deal, especially for long-term holdings. Yeah, Jeff's in.
That have, establishments that are on acreage.
Mhm.
Kind of goes back to what we were talking about with the square footage, that land rock could sell for 8,000 to 10,000 an acre, but we have to determine what the contributing value of the extra land. So if we were comparing it to a house with 3 acres and your house is 8, we got to figure out what the market pays for that extra 5. And they're not going to pay a full raw value price for it.
Unless it's sitting right
Unless
next
it's
door
sitting-
and it's got frontage to build on, in which case maybe you could sell that for premium. So we look at all that. Frontage it just really can affect it, but you're right. I mean, the contributory value.
But a lot, if you have a 10-acre lot, you've got 200 square feet and or 200 frontage and it goes straight back. That's not going to really offer a lot of contributing value compared to if you have 10 acres and you've got an instant perfect square.
In the ideal scenario, there would be, we find a house with a long skinny 5 and ours is long skinny 10. What's the difference? That's obviously not always the case. That's not always the case, but that's what we try to get our adjustments from is find stuff that's as similar as possible and just try to derive what we think the market did there. I don't think that helped a lot,
Can we
but
talk for a minute about barns and outbuildings? Because you have a 100-year-old functional 2-story barn, and then it also has more buildings on it. How do you guys decide to give those value?
yeah, market based. And a lot of people, depending on the type of property, obviously, if you've got a horse property with an arena, they might give just as much value to a stable building with a big red barn as they would as a brand new Morton building with 6-inch concrete. They might. Now, if you have a house on 3 acres that has a big old red barn that's been in really good shape, but you can't get equipment in there, but you have one that's got a 60 by 80 that's heated, insulated, the market may respond better to the new one than the old one. And traditionally speaking, and I'm trying not to get myself thrown in appraiser jail here, but traditionally speaking, in our market, they respond better to the newer ones. Just because the functionality of them is a little more rounded, they can put their camper in. Basketball court, soccer, you put a camper, a boat in there. They're better at keeping mice out. They're gonna last, they've lasted 100 years, but they should last longer. They don't have to be painted every 5 years. There's variables there, but, and those, again, markets vary, but contribute a percentage typically of what they cost to put in new. And I know that Ben and I talked about pools specifically the other day, and he was trying to run a different kind of system than I've done before. What was that number? Was it 7 on the neighborhood we were looking at? 7%?
It was 5%.
Yeah, so what Ben found is in the neighborhood, I think it was near my office, wasn't it, like 21st and Gage?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like 21st and Seabrook area, and there was a house with a pool. And we kind of figured out that pools are contributing about 7% of the total value of the property. Which, you know, in that neighborhood, pools aren't super common. People want them right now, obviously, but traditionally they're maybe a little bit older or something like that. These all matter, but we found that, you know, hey, on a $150,000 house, maybe that pool contributes $12,000. Obviously that matters, that changes significantly when you go into a $400,000 price point, but yeah, so just little ways to look at it.
So when you're talking about outbuildings, so when you're talking about outbuildings, and I'm sure there's other things that can kind of fall into this category, but if you have finished living space in an outbuilding.
Yeah.
That. And we're looking at the value, and this might, like a pool house or something like that too. Do you count that into the total living?
No, and ANSI does not allow us to. They have a specific exclusion for that makes us put that into an amenity line. That cannot be counted as gross living area for the main structure.
Because you do have a lot of people that.
Yeah. I know.
What is this
Oh, it adds value.
It'll add value. The way we do it's different. We don't put it into the total square footage. We just say, you know, the pool house has 400 square feet.
Yeah.
And adjust it.
It might add more value per square foot than having a house addition would. I mean, it might add less, might be the same, but we do treat it differently than the main floor of the house or the GLA of the house.
And what bedrooms? Say the other pool house for their actual conforming bedroom.
It turns
It's not
into
Shawnee County.
turns into more of an additional dwelling unit
Yeah.
or, and then it's a whole different process. We've got to find houses that have this additional living quarters on it.
Mhm.
And it's kind of viewed differently.
I'm sure you're taking.
As long as, I mean, it's got to have a kitchen, a bathroom, and a bed. If it just has a bedroom, then there's going to add value because he's going to stay in that bedroom without, didn't have to walk to the main house to use the bathroom.
But the county's not gonna allow.
They,
Yeah.
you need to talk to Shawnee County, okay, I won't quote them, but they have very, very strict regulations on guest houses and shared driveways that you should talk to planning and zoning about. Because don't just do it thinking that you're gonna be okay. So,
What if you're out in the county?
I mean, if they don't know, they don't know, you know, but we've all done that, we sneak stuff in. But the county is very specific on what they allow you to finish, not finish, and share. Very specific, so please check on that. If you have a seller that has one and they said we snuck this in, you're gonna be in for some fun.
It's a wonderful check. The middle of one. Right?
Yeah, they can.
Full kitchen cabinets, they have cap gas lines.
Yeah,
In the outbuilding.
yeah, they can.
Has to do with the septic.
Well, yes, and yeah, that's a big part of it. They have their own building requirements that aren't septic related and they have septic related requirements. And yeah, the county, for the most part, it can't be suitable for year round habitation. So,
You can only have one living, primary living
Right.
on one lot.
right,
And so if you see that it has kitchen cabinets, stoves, things like that, now they can keep the living room and the bedroom in there. You just have to remove those items to make it appear to be a second living quarters on the lot.
Why do they not want us to have more affordable?
They don't want us to have communes on our property.
So, and that's not even an affordable housing question. That's because there's a lot of wealthy people who want a guest house.
Yeah.
Or a mother-in-law suite, if you will. And,
Or for their teenage children, because this is. not-
right, yeah.
Like.
Yeah, no, I know, it's actually, other municipalities have gone through and they've embraced it, and they've said, hey, we're gonna tax this guy harder. This is gonna be awesome, there's really not a negative to it. Shawnee County has they're really, really opposed to it, and I've been fighting them for about 18 months on that, and someone needs to retire. Correct, because, that's right. Mhm. Yep,
Two separate press.
Yep.
Yeah, I've seen a few of those in the MLS. It's really rare, but
Yes.
it's essentially a conversation and about the affordability is an issue and how a lot of the local building codes are preventing people from adding additional ADUs, especially dwelling units,
Yeah.
dwelling units. And how bad that is because, you know, that could be a 2-bedroom rental. Now there's even more, yeah.
and I'm gonna kind of make this up because I can't remember the exact number, but it's shared driveways and accessory units. I think they were legal until like 2002 or 1998. The county went through and changed it, because so everything that was before that is fine, but now you can't do it. So shared driveways is another thing. They're Nazis at that time. Yeah. Yep. Unless it was before that year.
I had a question, total different.
Yeah.
But it was on painted ceilings on basements.
Yeah.
So how do you guys?
So for basement finished area, what I call finished could be different than what Anthony calls finished, but
We'll see.
we're probably pretty similar. I will give it basement finish if it's got painted subfloor, if the subfloor rafters are painted black or gray or whatever. If it's got finished walls, drywall, and if it's got at least like an epoxied or stained concrete floor. Sometimes you know, the lower value houses where they just painted the concrete walls, I might give it that. Just depends on how good the quality is.
I mean, ultimately, the question is really not even whether we consider it finished, it's what value do you get for it?
Yeah.
You're gonna get a different number if it looks like this with carpet and sheetrock versus if it has sprayed subfloor and epoxy floors, it's just a different value. Now, some of that epoxy floor is expensive.
There's some really nice ones.
Oh, yeah.
It has the carpet finish walls and everything, it sells them.
Yeah.
You guys will consider that its value.
And if it's not just the style of the home.
Yeah.
It's intentional, they wanted that.
And the question there, of course, is not so much what the seller or the homeowner, why they wanted it, it's what do the buyers want?
What's the
And-
market see it?
And if most buyers come in and they're like, because right now it's kind of starting to be accepted, it's a norm, and they're like, oh, cool, yeah, I can get this stuff, I can access it. But as long as you have, 6 out of 10 buyers would rather have it sheetrocked with can lights, you're gonna get less than you would if you get it that way. And it's just market based, it is different neighborhood to neighborhood for sure, but yeah, I mean, ultimately, a lot of homeowners did it because it's, they can access stuff and it looks cool, but they also saved $8,000. And that's a big contributory factor on why they did it in the first place, even though they think it looks cool, they ultimately save money. And that's how the market sometimes views it too, but it can be totally normal.
Can I piggyback off that?
Please.
My house, that the basement was finished prior to that foundation, that had to be fixed. So they went in and instead of like moving the walls, they cut rectangular, like.
Yeah.
the wall And put steel plates,
Yeah,
and the seller never covered that up, but everything else was finished.
sure.
And so when they went to appraise it, they said that can't be counted as finished space because there are rectangle holes.
I disagree.
Yeah, I disagree.
I disagree with that. I mean, because you could have had a return air vent over each one of those holes and nobody would mind.
Right. Oh, we can probably just go find some kind of temporary,
Yeah.
cabinet or something, because they kept them open so that they're the kinds that you kind of screw or tighten.
Yeah, it did.
Obviously, it's like,
Also comes back to see massive value to that, they don't do any work
Right.
whatsoever.
right,
That, I don't know who did that. That, I would disagree with that, so hopefully
It's kind of the same where they put I-beams up and they just go in and cut, there's a sliver of drywall out.
Yeah.
You kind of some will maybe factor with what we call the cost to cure, and it's just how much is it gonna cost to reframe it and then paint it, but.
Yeah.
If it's not significant,
that was like standard, or that was,
No, that should not be that way, in my opinion, for sure.
Are you guys see any ICF builds?
I've seen two.
ICF, it's where you concrete.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen two. I've appraised two in the
new
last.
ones or just,
Why, just one is almost done right now, yeah. Just
I've
kind
seen
of
them,
weird.
but I haven't seen the new construction.
Yeah, they're expensive.
Tornado proof,
Yes.
Yeah.
right,
You could have put it all around this for everything.
right.
One of them was to go over like we did maybe in it well, years ago.
Mm.
So I think this is something that you're gonna say something about market, blah, blah, blah. So.
What the hell, Melanie?
It's all about the market. I understand. But you, let's say you have a stick belt home, and you have an IKEA belt home. They are exactly the same floor plan, like,
Yeah.
there's nothing really to adjust, are
Sure.
you making an adjustment for ICF though?
The only thing that I've done, and I just did it last week, is I made a quality adjustment, and it was a decent sized one. Now, that was one that was gonna be held in-house. I don't think it was for you guys.
Is it on 48?
It was on Southeast something, out near Barrington, but really cool house. And I gave it like a 15% adjustment, which was about $80,000. But the problem is that really depends on who's the lender, because every house I used had that adjustment. And the cost approach, which is another way that we value stuff, is what it costs to build it. And this was brand new, so it worked. The cost approach was like 1.4 million, and this house was like 800,000 on the sales comparison side. So it's still not as much as it's costing to get you there. I mean, it's not, the value isn't there yet because we don't have enough sales to support it, but there's no doubt it's a quality adjustment because it's better insulated. I mean, hell, it's got a foot thick walls with spray foam insulation, and it's awesome.
And if you're selling one that has it, just type that into your remarks, because we can search MLS
Yes.
by just any keyword, so
Yeah.
it helps us find them.
You what? They're super cool. I mean, I'm in love with them, but it's tough. And I mean, if you have a local lender who's keeping it as a portfolio loan or in-house, which a lot of construction stuff gets that way. We can make adjustments based more on what we think than what we can prove. Most normal lenders won't allow that. Okay. And that's not really what you should be doing. But for those specifically, when you go through a local lender who is going to keep that loan, ultimately, they just want us to give our opinion of value, do our job, and not be regulated by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
They're typical vendors.
Not that I know. Most of the ones that I've seen have been the individual contracted it, brought in a crew from Texas or somewhere that does them a lot.
I have never.
Very specialized.
Well, we standard block.
They're neat.
Insulated, huge function.
Switch gears a little bit. So some of the new slabs from the geometries being built, like Cocoa, et cetera, and then got and storm shelter.
Yeah.
What do you add, how much value do you add to something like that?
Well,
Good.
I usually find most of the slab homes have them too, the comps that we use. So I don't really add anything because
Yeah.
if I'm using a slab home, or if I'm looking at a slab home, I'm using other slab homes.
Right.
So they'll have them most likely. So then there's really no value to add to it
Yeah.
unless you have.
No, that's it. I mean, on a new build, for a while, we could find new builds that had them and that didn't have them, and you just, the cost to do it. But lately, almost everybody on slabs has been putting them in either in the primary bedroom closet, or I've seen some bolt-in secondary stuff that you can put in the garage even. That's kind of neat, but
Yeah. Bolton's usually around $46,000.
Sure.
To have them set in and then have.
yeah. And it's not much more than that to do the closet while they're pouring the foundation. It's about the same to have the closet just be one. So
How do you think the square footage of, the total square footage of the house?
yes, because the comps we're using already have them. So there's no adjustment if everything has them.
So obviously, if the comparables didn't have it, then you would make a minor adjustment for having a storm shelter in place.
Yeah, and that's market driven. Now on a new build, we can do the
It's a
cost.
market.
Yeah, it is. And on a new build, it's a little easier to derive those because if you find one that has everything has a 3-car, this one has a 2-car and it brought $12,000 less. Oh my God, there's our adjustment, pretty easy. But with stuff that's established and it's 3 years old or 4 years old, if we don't find one, we have to find one that has one to support it essentially. So I saw this one first.
What is your label, discuss the reading volume?
Value. Can't tell you anything about value, or if you start telling us what you need, we'll probably not talk to you,
Yeah.
but I'm open to talk to you guys about really anything
Yeah.
until you start pushing for numbers.
Yeah,
Then we can't talk about that.
anything you can find online, we can talk to you about. But anything that we discovered through our process, which would include value, then yeah, we can't talk to you about.
What value do you add to the roof? Is it street fab, architectural, or?
It's almost impossible to give that any value in most situations because the roof's a roof. If it functions, it functions.
And we assume it functions unless,
Yeah.
and look at it, there's missing shingles or if it's discolored.
Yeah.
Or if it's in the contract that there's gonna be an inspection done.
Systems of a house, we have a blanket statement. I have a blanket statement in mine anyway that says, systems including HVAC, mechanicals, roofs, foundations, is assumed to be in proper working condition. If it is not, it's gonna hurt your value. But if it's 8-year-old furnace and air versus a brand new furnace and air, it's not gonna necessarily add to your value. It's gonna be a marketing point. But there's probably very few buyers in the normal market that's going to buy a house specifically because it has a new central air and not an 8-year-old one. It just doesn't happen. So not to say it's not a marketing point, but it doesn't necessarily add to value. Now you get enough of those things. Well, everything is new and you've redone everything. Now it's a condition rating and our condition adjustments are pretty easy to support in the market because people want a nicer house more than they want a house that needs updates. But if it's just one thing and the rest of the house is the same, probably not much to go off of there as far as an adjustment.
There's the income from the nice above ground pool, got a couple of decks on it.
Well, I don't know how you do it, but I consider above ground pools personal property. I don't include it in my report.
Yeah.
Well, I include it in my report, but I say no value because it's personal property. That pool could be gone tomorrow.
Even if it has a built-in deck.
Now the deck gets value, even though the deck with a weird circle curve around it might not add any value.
Right.
But yeah, now decks tend to get contributory value. Pools though, above ground pools are really challenging because right now we're seeing some market participants want those nice Doughboy $15,000 above ground pools, but are they paying extra because it has it? Find me 3 sales that warrant yes, and we'll talk about it, but I can't find them.
But it definitely helps the marketability, I would say.
Yeah, it's a huge marketing point. It's just, as long as there's buyers out there that don't want that above ground pool, it may not add anything.
That's a tough one.
Bing, bing, bing.
And I remember this being discussed in our previous appraisal panel, when it is solely for print, or the value is less because, it smells like cat piss or something like that.
Please put cat piss in there.
Please.
Tell me.
But it's very,
Don't,
it's
just put it in there, cat piss.
like.
Okay, good.
Sure, if it's solely for print.
Yeah.
Mostly because I don't want the calls, never in mind you guys calling me, but you know, like.
Yeah.
Both of us, it's gonna.
I'm 90% sure that Ben and I are gonna agree on this. That needs to be in there. I mean,
Anything that you think is an issue, we'd like to see it, because we need to know.
because otherwise, if you take
Because
really
the
great,
sold before prints are hard for us because we don't know the condition, we don't know.
was it for sale by owner for the last month and you brought the only offer, put that in there. When that, anything you've got, put it in there because agents are notoriously awesome for taking great listing photos, even though it's a complete shit box. Okay? What that does though, hey, this super updated house with its awesome photos brought 100,000. Well, this one that I just went into was not quite as awesome as that one. Didn't smell like cat pee, but pretty much the same overall condition, sold for 92. It's not worth 92. But if you put in there, this one stunk, you know, or vice versa. Put in there that stuff and we'll know that, hey, this one sold low because of that. Or if this one brought that and it had those issues, this one's probably worth more because it doesn't have those issues. So, yeah.
Would it be helpful for you if they put in the agent remarks, you know, it was listed in Lawrence and all that sort of, it wasn't.
Yeah, I
If they're searching in RPR.
And if it's sold, put it in the public remarks even. I mean, what's it hurt? No one sees it but us, right?
I would think.
Not once it's sold though.
Like me.
That's fine. Load it up.
Really have stuff.
There's data that gets transmitted.
If you're gonna put cat piss, put it in agent remarks. Got it. Good questions. Are we done? My birthday, I have to go. What? Which thing?
Yeah.
Are you sure that you should be headed to the golf course about after this, right?
No, I'm gonna go work on my camper. I'm going on a road trip on Friday for a week. In a camper that I've never driven farther than an hour. So wish me luck in that 110-degree Houston heat, guys. If anything could happen.
All right, does anybody else have any?
And if you ever do have any questions, reach out to any of us. because
Jeff,
we're relevant to those. Hard questions or complaints to Jeff.
Thank you to anybody who joined us online today.
Yeah.